The last time anyone saw Peninah Travers, she was walking down the fog-slicked boardwalk toward the cliffs that overlooked the Atlantic. It was just after sunrise. She had earbuds in, her journal tucked under one arm. The sea wind tangled her hair. She never made it to school. Bayshore was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked and still waved at the mailman. So when a teenager vanished without a trace, it wasn't just a mystery, it was a rupture. Sheriff Paul Huxley led the search. A quiet, middle-aged man with too many regrets and too few successes, Huxley took Peninah's case personally. She was the same age as his own daughter had been when she died, also suddenly, also senselessly. Everyone wanted answers. But what they got were 5 clues that meant everything. Once it was too late. Peninah's mother, Hannah, called the police at 10:12 a.m. when the school called to ask where her daughter was. Her bed was made. Her phone still buzzed with unread messages. Her shoes, muddy from her usual morning walk, were gone. So was she. The cliffs she loved were searched first. No sign. Nobody. Just a dropped journal, damp from the fog, its final page stained by rain and smudged ink. That afternoon, a volunteer found a shiny, unusual button caught on a gnarled root along the trail near the cliffs. Not like one from a jacket. Military style. Engraved. Sheriff Huxley bagged it, marked it, and sent it for testing. No match in their database. They assumed it had washed in from the sea, like the driftwood and old boots that often littered the shore. What they didn't know. It belonged to a former Navy mechanic named Donnie Keene, who had just been released from a psychiatric facility 2 towns over. He had a history of stalking young women. Why it didn't solve the case? The lab miscatalogued it. The name Donnie Keene wasn't flagged until 4 years later, when his profile was updated after another woman's disappearance. On Peninah's laptop, investigators found a draft email never sent. Read. He's been following me again. Same coat. Same boots. Waited outside the bakery this time. Should I tell someone? It was dated 2 days before she vanished. Huxley questioned her friends. None of them had heard about a stalker. Peninah hadn't spoken to her mother about it either. What they didn't know. Peninah had tried to tell someone. Her school counselor. But the woman was on vacation the entire week, and the message Peninah left on her voicemail was deleted by accident. Why it didn't solve the case? The draft was seen as vague. Without a name or image, the department decided not to chase ghosts. A fisherman named Hank said he saw a girl running near the old fish cannery that morning looking frightened. But Hank was half drunk by 9 a.m. most days, and the cannery had been abandoned for years. His statement was logged, then quietly dismissed. What they didn't know. Hank's story was true. Surveillance from a weather station camera, discovered 6 years later, showed a girl in a green hoodie, Peninah's favorite, sprinting past the cannery at 7:14 a.m. Why it didn't solve the case? No one checked the cannery camera. No one took Hank seriously. By the time they did, the footage had been automatically erased. 2 tourists reported a rust-colored van parked near the cliffside parking lot, engine running at 7 a.m. They thought it was odd, especially since there was a red scarf dangling from the rearview mirror. They mentioned it briefly to a deputy at the gas station. He never wrote it down. What they didn't know. That van had been flagged in New Hampshire in connection with a child abduction. It belonged to Donnie Keene. The scarf? Peninah's. Her mother later confirmed she'd worn it that morning. Why it didn't solve the case. Without a report, the detail never reached the task force. By the time the deputy remembered the conversation, the van and Keene were gone. Peninah always carried an old disposable camera. She liked the unpredictability of film. Weeks after she vanished, a local developer found one dropped off with no name. He assumed it belonged to a wedding guest from out of town. It sat on a shelf behind his desk, undeveloped. What they didn't know. The last photo was a blurry image of a man in a heavy coat, following Peninah near the cannery. His face was half obscured. Behind him? The rust-colored van. Why it didn't solve the case. The film wasn't developed until 2029 years later, during a clearance sale when the shop finally closed. Huxley recognized the man in the photo instantly. Donnie Keene was arrested in 2021 in Vermont for unrelated charges. His fingerprints finally triggered an alert about the button, now updated in the federal system. Sheriff Huxley flew up immediately. But Keene had suffered a stroke days earlier. He never woke up. He died before he could be questioned. No confession. No location of a body. The mystery remained. Peninah was declared legally dead in 2022. Her mother, Hannah, stopped attending vigils after the 10th year. Her house still had Peninah's room preserved, Bed made, books lined up, a green hoodie hanging on the door. At a press interview, someone asked Huxley what haunted him most. He stared at the camera and said, "It wasn't that we didn't have the answers. It was that we had all of them. Just not when we needed them." In the end, Peninah wasn't failed by lack of clues. She was failed by the timing. 5 pieces of truth. All real. All important. But they surfaced like flares in the dark, seen but always too late. This is Crime Unscripted. Please like and subscribe.